Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Living Schoolyards Act lecture series. Today, we are exploring the community, green jobs, and economic benefits of schoolyard transformation and also Living Schoolyards Month. Next slide. I'm Nancy Striniste, Green Schoolyard America's National Policy Liaison. I'm joined by my Green Schoolyards America colleagues, Rachel Pringle, who will be managing the chat and the Q&A, and Dante Sudalovsky, who is running our tech today, and also our CEO, Sharon Danks, is here today. Please introduce yourselves in the chat if you haven't already. Next. The Living Schoolyards Act is a groundbreaking bill that will direct important federal resources towards transforming school grounds into living schoolyards, richly layered outdoor environments that strengthen local ecological systems while providing place-based, hands-on learning resources for students of all ages. It is incredibly exciting to see this bill in the federal record, and today is an especially exciting day. This legislation offers a huge opportunity to improve the educational experiences and health of children all across this country, as well as realize climate, ecological, community, and economic benefits. Next slide. Some background. The Living Schoolyards Act was introduced in the U.S. Senate by Martin Heinrich, the Democrat from New Mexico, in September of 2022. Senator Heinrich is reintroducing the bill today, May 10th, 2023. We are going to ask you to reach out today to your senators and congresspeople and encourage them to co-sponsor the bill. There'll be a link in the chat about how to find contact information for your senators and congresspeople. When you call or email, please say this. Please have the senator's staff contact Elizabeth Hill in Senator Heinrich's office. There's an automatic directory, so we don't need to give you an email address. Staffers can find each other easily, but write that down and please make that call and give that message. The bill has undergone some rewrites since it was introduced last fall, and we think that those make it even stronger. We will have the link to the current language of the bill on our website as soon as possible. Next. The goals of the Living Schoolyards Act lecture series first is to build a grassroots community of active support for the bill. As we've discussed in the past 3 lectures, learning outdoors on living schoolyards is a powerfully engaging way to improve children's academic experiences, to benefit their physical and mental health, and living schoolyards provide ecological benefits and mitigate the effects of climate change. We believe that every child deserves the opportunity for hands-on experiential learning in the out of doors. And as we will discuss today, living schoolyards are a powerful tool for providing green spaces that benefit whole communities, address food inequity, and create green jobs. The next goal is to unite and grow our coalition of organizations. Within the coalition, we are building around this bill. There's a huge amount of knowledge, expertise, and on-the-ground experience. This lecture series has been bringing us together and drawing on that expertise. Each of our speakers today and in the past lecture series are from organizations that are part of this coalition. And of course, the main goal of the lecture series is to highlight the many benefits of living schoolyards and to create a library of recorded testimony that can be used by elected officials and their staffs to understand the benefits of this legislation, and can be used anytime anyone needs to advocate and educate about the benefits of living schoolyards. Next. You can support the Living Schoolyards Act by going to our website and joining the coalition of endorsers. We now have 156 coalition member organizations, and we need yours. Senator Heinrich has cited this support in his reintroduction today and in a press release that's going to be going out this afternoon. We are told, and I've mentioned this in the past lectures, that when House and Senate offices get lots of emails, calls, and letters, especially on the same day they take notice, there is contact information on our webpage, and I think it's in the chat. So let's let them hear from us today. You can also share our student toolkit with kids that you know and encourage them to write. Student letters to elected officials have a huge impact. You can follow us on social media and share our posts. We encourage you to write an op-ed in your local paper. And finally, you can visit the local or DC offices of your senators and representatives in Congress and tell them about this bill and how much it would mean to you and to kids. And then don't forget to tell us about what you've done to support the Living Schoolyards Act. Next. This month is Living Schoolyards Month, so it's incredibly appropriate that the bill was reintroduced today. One of the things that we're encouraging people to do is to plan a schoolyard tour and invite elected officials and local press. Every senator and congressperson has a local office as well as a DC office. So reach out to them. This is a great way to make the case for the value of and the need for living schoolyards and focus attention on this legislation. We have a page on our website for schoolyard tour planning tips, and I think that will be linked in the chat. And we're working on a flyer now that the bill has been reintroduced today. We will put up a flyer soon that you will be able to print and give out on your tours. And if you have thoughts and experiences or questions on schoolyard tours, put those in the chat, please. Next slide. The first 3 sessions in this 5-part series focused on the educational, health, climate, and ecological benefits of living schoolyards, and all those recordings are available online. Today, our focus shifts to the community and economic benefits of living schoolyards and of the act when it becomes law. Our speakers today come from local and national organizations whose work addresses food equity, job training, green jobs, teacher education, and the value of community green space. Together, they bring decades of experience in the field and a wealth of knowledge. We know time is always short, and we apologize for limiting their presentation so much. Please read their bios that will be posted in the chat and follow the incredibly vast work that each of them and their organizations are doing. As you listen to our speakers, feel free to post questions in the chat. Our GSA team will respond when we can, and there will be time for the panelists to respond after they all speak. We'll also be posting research links in the chat and afterwards on our website, along with the lecture recordings. Our speakers today are Laura Thompson, the Director of Strategic Alliances at Big Green, Ryan Parker, who is the Impact and Partnership Lead for FoodCorps in the state of Maine, Jeanne McCarty, who is the CEO of Outteach, and our final speaker today will be Danielle Denk, the National Community Schoolyards Initiative Director at the Trust for Public Land. Huge gratitude to our speakers today. And now I'll turn it over to Laura. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks to Green Schoolyards America for the invitation to join the conversation today. Dante, you can go to the next slide, please. Well, I'm here today to talk about the community benefits of living schoolyards, but I want to start off with talking a little bit about who Big Green is and what we do. So Big Green is a national nonprofit organization founded in 2011. We believe that growing food changes lives, and that's for many reasons. It can improve nutrition security, mental health, connect us with nature, open our eyes to the impact of climate change, and even improve economic mobility. We've spent the last 12 years helping people grow their own food with garden-based education, scalable modular garden products and systems, and a community of support and collaboration. We've built a network of over 700 vibrant and edible learning gardens in schools, and we are now advancing that work to also include home, school, and community gardens across the country. Next slide, please. So how do we do this work? Big Greens gardens, grants, and community gatherings make it possible for more people to start growing food. We provide modular garden beds and flexible grant funding to schools to help them start or expand their edible garden programs. We provide garden beds and training for home gardeners to learn to grow their own food. And we make strategic and community-led grants to nonprofits to fund, strengthen, and connect garden programs. This includes the Big Green DAO, which is a decentralized grant making body designed to radically reconceive and restructure grant making, disrupt embedded power structures, and put nonprofits in the driver's seat of philanthropy. In partnership with Big Green, nearly 100,000 people are growing their own food this year. Next slide, please. I want to talk a bit about why we support the Living Schoolyards Act. Big Green has signed on as an endorser of this act, and we're really excited to be able to support it. This new legislation will enable schools to completely re-envision their outdoor spaces on school grounds with the goal of providing more hands-on learning opportunities, strengthening local ecological systems and community resilience, and giving every child a place where they can engage in hands-on learning and play outside. I have a quote here from a superintendent at one of our partner school districts in Michigan that demonstrates the importance of living schoolyard spaces, not only to schools, but also to the community. So I'm just going to quickly read that out loud here. Big Green school gardens promote food, nature, and health education, but also provide fresh food for the school's families, staff, and the larger community. We have numerous learning gardens throughout our district that impact thousands of students annually. The fabric of our community continues to be actively woven together with the grandparents, parents, senior citizens, and residents who support and volunteer in the gardens. Together, we are building a strong and vibrant community where students make a difference locally and globally. Next slide, please. So building upon that quote, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the research demonstrates that living schoolyards benefit communities. Living schoolyards, and from Big Green's experience, specifically edible gardens, have a myriad of benefits for the community, particularly through students' development as members of their community, as local citizens, and as the opportunity for families and other community members to engage in these spaces. One of the ways that living schoolyards benefit communities is through creating a hub for community engagement, bringing folks from around the community to engage in the garden space. That includes the school community and outside the school community. So that would be families and other community members. These spaces also build social and community skills for students, which really benefit their participation in their own community. Research demonstrates that school gardens encourage teamwork, individual responsibility, and a commitment to success. In much the same way that team sports can foster pride in student athletes, school gardens can strengthen bonds between the school gardeners, schools, and their communities. Many gardens involve community volunteers who assist students as they plant, tend, and learn in the garden. Research shows that increased interaction between children, teachers, and volunteers can encourage growth in interpersonal and cooperative skills that follow children throughout their lives. Students who participate in school garden programs can show significant improvements in self-understanding and cooperation to achieve group goals. And student participants demonstrate increased self-esteem and improved understanding of personal responsibility, as well as enhanced relationships and increased involvement with parents and other family members. And I want to just touch on that a bit. Research demonstrates that the vast amount of learning and development can occur within the child's home and their school environment. So there's needed to be increased attention about how do we bring those spaces together, the home and the school. Research also suggests that when parents are actively involved, students can achieve higher success regardless of their socioeconomic status, ethnic, racial background, or level of parental education. So there's huge benefit in really bringing the community in to be part of these living schoolyard spaces. And community building may not be the most obvious outcome of gardening projects, but research has demonstrated that it can be one of the most significant and long-lasting impacts that these spaces can have. Another benefit to living schoolyards is that they foster healthy lifestyle habits that can really stay with a student throughout their entire lives. A 2018 randomized control study done by Cornell University found that children whose schools provided regular school garden lessons had more access to vegetables and fruit at home than children without that curricula. And research also demonstrates that children are significantly more likely to eat vegetables that they have grown, and to ask family members to buy vegetables for them. These healthy habits can continue into adulthood. And that includes physical movement. There's a lot of physical movement that takes place in garden spaces, and increased physical activity can overflow to a children's life outside of school. Finally, environmental stewardship is a huge benefit of living schoolyards. Students can carry becoming environmental stewards into the rest of their lives. Research has demonstrated that students who participate in hands-on garden classroom programs develop greater concern and awareness for resource conservation and allocation, and that can have a huge impact on their role in their community as they grow into young adults. Next slide, please. To provide an example from Big Green's work, I would like to highlight one of our wonderful partners, Mrs. Walker, who is a chemistry teacher at Craigmont High School in Memphis, Tennessee. She is working to create community with her students within her school, and it's having impacts that ripple outside of that space. She's building through her garden, and now the orchard that she's building that you'll hear about in a moment in this video, she's building something that the students can share with their families over time, and also provide them with access to nutritious food and an opportunity to engage in new experiences that they can take with them as future active members of their community. She's also fostering cooperation amongst her students, and they're learning to work together. So I just want to share this as a demonstration of the impact that living schoolyards can have on the school community and outside of that as well. Go ahead, Dante.
Ooh, what do I love about growing food? Can I say everything? My relationship to growing up with food is, to me, quite similar to my students, because I think I grew up quite similar to my students. I love to see the excitement on kids' faces when they actually get an aha moment, or when I'm able to give them experiences they wouldn't have gotten without my involvement. Initiation with gardening and Big Green, they happened simultaneously. Everything kind of just aligned in the stars. As I started learning it and understanding connections that gardening has with life and freedom and sustainability and being conscious and mindful of your input and your output, like, why haven't I been doing this? There is something in gardening that will allow me to just be me. I started making lists of things that I wanted to do and looking at the resources that I had in front of me. The Jumpstart grant allowed me to utilize the resources at the school and say, hey, we have this area back here that nobody's really using. This is a great space to start an orchard and plant some trees. These kids would probably never have planted a tree in their life. That was eye-opening. And it was like, oh my God, look at what something like this can actually do and how far it can actually reach. That allowed us to start something that these students can be a part of for the rest of their life. They can even bring their kids up here and say, I helped plant these trees. Students to come can say, I helped cultivate these trees. I harvested from these trees. This is what I did. This is what I can do. Growing food will definitely change your life. I like to put it in this perspective. If I can wake up and only have to go outside and do things in my garden, that's a great day. If I have people out there helping me do things, that's an even better day. But if more people were out here and could and would do the same, now that's the dream.
Great. Next slide, please, Dante.
Ooh-wee.
I love that at the beginning of the video. So Great. Well, I think that video really demonstrates the impact that these living schoolyards can have on a school community and reaching outside of that as well. So I'd like to close today with kind of reiterating Nancy's call to action to support the Living Schoolyards Act. And there are so many ways that you can do this by endorsing the legislation as Big Green did, through your organization, by writing a letter to your member of Congress. They have a really great template on the Green Schoolyards America website that makes it really easy to do that, and instructions on how to reach out to your member of Congress. You can write an op-ed in your local paper about the importance of this work and the importance of this bill. You can engage your students in your school if you or participate in a school community in some way, and teach them about advocating for something that they believe in. And that's pretty exciting to help them share their voices. And finally, hosting a schoolyard tour is another opportunity to highlight the great work happening in your community and demonstrating the impact that these living schoolyard spaces can have. Next slide, please, Dante. Well, I want to thank you all for having me today. I have my contact information here on the slide if you're interested in reaching out, and you can check out biggreen.org and learn more about our work with Living Schoolyards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. We love Big Green. That was great. Ryan Parker from FoodCorps in the state of Maine. We want to welcome you and hear from you next.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you, Laura, for all that information and all that you're doing as well. So my name is Ryan Parker. I'm the Impact and Partnerships Lead for FoodCorps. We're a national organization. We serve in currently 13 states. Next year it will be 17. And we're part of the AmeriCorps service network, which basically allows us to take AmeriCorps FoodCorps service members and place them directly in schools all across the country to do some of the same type of work that Laura was just describing. We do a lot of work with school gardens and a lot of work in school cafeterias. So I'll get a little bit into some of that. Basically, we use the medium of food to change the educational paradigm in the country. That's kind of our goal. Not only the education itself, but the schools where kids learn. We do a lot of infrastructure building around school gardens, orchards, particularly with the onset of the pandemic and some of the COVID relief money that eventually trickled down to schools. A lot of our schools that we partner with in Maine and beyond our partnerships used a lot of that money to build a lot of outdoor infrastructure, whether it was hoop houses, greenhouses, learning pavilions, nature trails. So we've been weirdly fortunate that that was an outcome of the pandemic, but it's definitely forced a lot of sometimes skeptical administrators in particular, but some teachers as well, to really see what a lot of us have been preaching about for a long time, that things improve a lot when you get kids outside. So that's kind of we do all of that through the medium of food and healthy food for kids. As a national organization, we have a pretty big goal to codify all of this for every kid in the country. We want by 2030 to have essentially every kid in the country, no matter their zip code, their race, their place, every kid to have equal access to food education and nourishing meals in schools. And those are sort of two of our big areas of focus. I'll talk a little bit about that. We have 3 areas of service that our service members engage in when they when we partner with schools and place service members in schools. The first one is hands-on learning, which is really geared toward gardening and cooking. So it depends on where in the country we happen to be partnered. But as was mentioned, I'm from Maine, and we have about a 3.5-day growing season here. The rest of the time it's winter. So we do a lot of gardening in the summer, fall, and late spring. And then our service members tend to transition their hands-on learning to more cooking lessons, nutrition, food systems lessons. And a lot of our lessons are geared towards helping teachers reach kids with the curriculum that they already have to teach to and the learning standards they already have to teach to, but enhancing that by providing the tools of hands-on learning and experiential learning. So as an example of an outdoor lesson, one of the learning standards for 4th graders in the state of Maine is that's when in math in 4th grade, they start to learn to calculate area and volume. And for some kids, you can stand at the blackboard and do as many worksheets as you want, and they just will not be able to conceptualize it because that's not how their brains work. But if you go out into a schoolyard and there's a raised bed with a square foot gardening grid laid out on top of it, they'll instantly understand what you've been trying to tell them for 3 weeks. So we've really seen that work. And then as an example of an indoor hands-on lesson, one of the things that we like to do is there's a lesson that FoodCorps developed where kids will actually work together to make a fruit salad. And we're really big on kids doing everything from washing to chopping the vegetables to mixing, everybody working together. And again, we are really big on healthy foods. And at the end, they're going to make the fruit salad. They're going to try it and hopefully like it and choose that as a snack in the future. But while all of that's happening, they're also learning measurement skills, division, fractions, and teamwork. So we kind of try to surreptitiously build some of that in, which I know a lot of experiential educators are very familiar with. Our second area of service is really based around the school cafeteria and kitchen. And in this instance, we're really trying to do a number of things. One is improve the environment in the cafeteria so that it's a welcoming, friendly place where kids feel comfortable eating. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case in a lot of school cafeterias across the country. So we're trying to change that. But we're also trying to make sure that kids get access to and partake in the national school meal programs, breakfast, lunch, after school snacks, etc., because they are providing a lot of pretty healthy, nourishing food, and a lot of kids are not taking advantage of it for a number of different reasons. Some of that is related to things like flavor profile and palate. Some kids just don't prefer a certain type of vegetable that's a commodity that a school nutrition director can get through USDA. So what we try to do is work with our service members to try to do different taste tests and things like that to give feedback to the kitchen staff to see what they could be doing to change the recipe for that to get more kids to partake in eating those vegetables. We also do a lot of taste tests just around getting kids to try new things. Research has shown for us that it takes about 10 different tries for a kid to not only like something, but even for sure determine if they like it or not. A lot of kids will just default to, I don't like it if it's a new thing. And so we try to encourage them to try new things. And then our final area of service is really about embracing the entire community, no matter where we're serving, to advance equity through food. And this is really a lot about community engagement, whole school engagement, and staying power, because AmeriCorps programs in general, but certainly FoodCorps, is not meant to be a permanent fixture. What we're really trying to do is help schools that invite us in build partnership, build capacity, then we can step into another community, but we don't want to have built up a bunch of stuff and then have it drop off a cliff when we no longer are placing a service member there. So really, that's kind of what I want to talk about today is our approach to building that longevity of programming and allowing it to continue to build. I just want to highlight quickly one of the reasons for what I'm going to talk about in a second. Here are just some big picture numbers from the last, what we call program year, school year 21-22. We have this year, or last year rather, we had 9 service members in the state of Maine. We're partnered in 7 communities. And this is some pretty amazing output for that small number. However, Maine has 192 school districts. We have over 600 public schools. We have about 180,000 public school students in the state of Maine. So at the rate that FoodCorps is going, it would take us over 800 years to reach every kid. So that's not a very sustainable or satisfying model. And so as a result of that, we've kind of begun shifting from a solely service-based program to one that takes all of the experience we've learned over the last decade from that, continuing that service, but then levering that up into a policy framework. And that's why the Living Schoolyards Act is so exciting as just one of many opportunities that I think are starting to, we're kind of getting to that critical mass stage of when people are starting to realize the value of this type of learning. So I'll talk a little bit about that approach that we take. Essentially, we're really big on taking the experience that we have in communities all across Maine, and this is true in other states where we serve, but taking those real life experiences and what I call a portfolio of success, which is basically when we partner with a community for a number of years, and our partnerships are very deep. We do tend to partner for a long time to make sure that everything is slow and methodical, and that we are building that sustainability. But then we're taking all of those stories and taking them to legislatures, school boards at the local level, and then up to the federal level to try to get policy so that this is not a 1,200 students in the state of Maine who just happen to be going to the 7 schools that FoodCorps partners with. but that experiential learning really becomes regular learning for every kid in the country. I think everyone on this call probably understands the benefits of that, and I don't necessarily need to go into all of the long list of benefits, but we are trying to like I said, lever up and really impact policymakers at all levels to try to get them to put some really funding, is what it comes down to, funding and capacity behind some of these issues. So I just want to highlight really quickly this young gentleman here. His name is Benjamin Rivers, and he's from the Katahdin area, which is in northern Maine, very rural area. And in the background in this picture, his mom and dad, you can't see it really in the picture, but very, very proud of him right now, because he actually traveled 2.5 hours to testify in the Maine legislature last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, for a public hearing on this bill, LD 1682, which was introduced this year in the Maine legislative session. And this bill would essentially create a grant program for schools to start creating permanent outdoor educator positions. And so Benjamin's been part of a food corps program in Katahdin Elementary School, and it's really transformed his life, and he has a great story to tell. And I think it's a really awesome opportunity for him to come and testify. And that's something that has been shared as something that you can be doing. And I will tell you, from someone who's a school board member myself and someone who's worked in the Maine legislature for a number of years, anytime you can get a kid to tell their story, it's worth 20 adults. It's very rare, it's hard to do, but the payoff for it is really big. And that was definitely the case when Benjamin testified in the legislature for this bill. There was no opposition to it, which was fantastic. There were about 17 people who testified in favor. And frankly, we could have all just sat there and been quiet while Benjamin talked, and he would have carried the show. So getting your students and their families to make calls, testify in front of their school boards, their state legislatures, again, it's harder, but it's very much worth it. So what all of this means to me, as someone who has been a commercial farmer for a number of years and has now sort of transitioned into the policy world and running these programs, I'm really big also as a school board member. A lot of the arguments that you hear always come back to money and economics, and living schoolyards and experiential learning really lend themselves well to that, because they do two things. One is, particularly with the grant program that I just outlined, but also when you're building living schoolyards, you really need people to be the hub of the wheel, to maintain that infrastructure, to connect teachers with the learning opportunities that are out there, because a lot of teachers, while they have a lot of training in teaching outside is not the same, as many of us know. Experiential learning often takes a lot more of a different kind of prep. There's often cleanup and post-lesson work that is different from the post-lesson work that happens in an indoor space. So what we're really trying to do in Maine and across the country is to try to create teaching positions, whether they be ed tech or certified teachers or even garden coaches, food education teachers, to basically be the people in school, because we don't want to create all these programs and then try to put them as one more thing on a teacher's plate. There's no more capacity for that. I think teachers and administrators and cafeteria, custodial work, everybody in schools is already strapped at 110%. So we're really trying to create these new positions and have people do that work. And at FoodCorps, a big part of why we do that, the work we do through our service members, is that it's really job training. We want our service members who can serve for a maximum of 2 years to then go into career paths that follow FoodCorps' mission and our goals, to try to, over the course of a few generations of service members, we're trying to slowly get this mission and this mindset out into schools, into nonprofits, into food systems and food insecurity work in all of these states. And again, then take all that experience and lever it up to the policymakers. So I'll just highlight here on the left. Here, the lady in the red shirt is a Living Schoolyards teacher in Portland, Maine. We were able to create 5 positions there, fully in-house positions. They're currently funded through COVID relief money, but that expires at the end of the coming school year. And so we'll be working on an advocacy campaign to try to shift that into the regular school budget. The middle picture, her name is the woman in the brown jacket. Her name is Maggie Blumenthal. She was a service member for 2 years at a site in Maine, and then was hired as a school garden coordinator at a different school where we partner, which has since graduated, and now she runs the program there. It's fully contained in-house. And so that's a full-time teaching job for her with great salary and benefits. It's also funded through COVID, but the superintendent and the board have already committed 100% to shifting that position into the school budget next year. So it'll be more permanent, as well as there's now so much demand for this that they want to create another ed tech position to support her in one of the more remote schools in that district. And then I would just highlight that, again, as I said, we're only in 7 communities in the state of Maine. This map's a little bit deceptive because we've recently graduated. One of the dots that's on this map hasn't been updated yet, but we'd really like this. As I said, we really want the type of learning that's pictured here, the type that Laura talked about, the type that the other folks on the panel are going to talk about, that you all as educators experience. We really want that to become regular. That should just be the way kids learn, or at least have the opportunity to learn. Certainly it's not going to be for everybody, but we think every school in the country should be supported if they want to have this kind of learning. And then I'll just close with, this is my contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has here, and people are welcome to follow up with me about the legislation or our support for the Living Schoolyards Act, and any questions you have about FoodCorps. I appreciate the opportunity.
Wow, thank you, Ryan. Amazing things happening in the state of Maine and across the country through FoodCorps for food equity and communities and job creation. We really appreciate hearing from you. And next, we're going to hear from Jeanne McCarty, from the CEO of Outteach, and she's going to tell us more about these areas and how Outteach helps with job creation and job training in Living Schoolyards. Welcome, Jeanne.
Thank you, Nancy. Thanks so much for the introduction and for the opportunity to be on this panel with such great speakers. And to allow me to talk a little bit about how Green Schoolyards and Living Schoolyards can help prepare students for the jobs of the future. So if we turn it to the next slide. So I'm the CEO at Outteach, and we're an organization that is built to prepare and inspire our future workforce. So these are our future innovators, our dreamers, our thinkers, and our doers. And we do this by partnering with schools to do 2 things. So first, we work with them to transform their school grounds into real-world labs that can bring learning to life across the curriculum. We also coach and mentor teachers to use these outdoor spaces to improve academics. And I'd like to start by sharing just a little bit about myself personally. Like many of us, my own childhood experiences really led to my career in education. I grew up in South Mississippi, and both of my parents were educators. My grandparents were also teachers. And I spent a lot of time with them and with other educators and in classrooms. So I even used my grandmother's old books and worksheets to set up my own class in the neighborhood, and I taught the neighborhood kids. And I also spent a lot of time with my father, who loved the outdoors, and we explored the garden in our yard. We also explored the creeks and the woods throughout our home in South Mississippi. So my focus in education has always brought those 2 together. So it's really been where education kind of meets real world learning and in outdoor settings. And while we don't all kind of follow in our parents' footsteps, I share this because it really is our early experiences that shape kind of what we can envision for ourselves in the future. And for me, like many of you, those experiences may have occurred at home, but for others, these experiences also occur in school settings. So one thing I wanted to share is that research shows that our career paths are largely set by 6th grade. And so these early years, these years that kids spend in elementary schools, are just so critically important. And they're the ones where kids have experiences that can really help them think about what their futures may be. So what if a child just never has an opportunity to engage with science and STEM in a way that they might think about themselves in a science career or a STEM career, when this is our fastest growing job sector? This is where I think Living Schoolyards can have one of the most significant impacts. So let's go to the next slide. So I'll share more about how Living Schoolyards may impact that, but first I want to take a look at the direction of our workforce and where opportunities lie in the future. So jobs in the STEM sector, those jobs that are involving science, engineering, technology, and math. They are the fastest growing job sector and have been for over a decade now. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 10 million workers currently in STEM occupations, and this is projected to grow by 11% by 2031. So if you look at this, this is 2 times faster than all other occupations combined. So this is significant growth. And the median salary for STEM careers is often 2 times higher than these other occupations. So STEM opportunities are also projected to open up across the country, bringing so much greater geographic diversity to where STEM jobs will be in the future, and much more diversity than where they are now. So right now, if you look at the East Coast and the West Coast, we're going to see a growth in STEM jobs throughout the rest of the country. So let's look at the next slide. So there's so much opportunity when you consider who will fill these jobs. There are almost 50 million students in our public schools in the United States, and it's an incredibly diverse population. In 2021, more than 44% of our public school students were Black, Hispanic, American Indian, or Pacific Islander. Yet when you look at our STEM workforce at that time, this group collectively represented only 24% of the workers. In that same year, women made up only 35% of the STEM workforce. So we have so much untapped talent and potential in our public schools. So many students that with the right support can fill these jobs that we're seeing grow so fast in the future. And this is just a tremendous opportunity for us. But to do so, we really have to think about how we're engaging, preparing, and inspiring our students early on and before it's too late. So really, this has to happen before 6th grade. Let's look at the next slide. So with these opportunities on the horizon, we should really think about how to invest in education strategies that will both prepare and inspire our students to consider careers in STEM. This starts with an early science education, and one that is not just hands-on, but real-world based. We also should think about how that pathway continues for science throughout their time in middle school and in high school. But unfortunately, we're not prioritizing science education if you look at the data. So before the pandemic, elementary students across the country on average spent only 18 minutes in science a day. And this lack of focus on science is also reflected in our performance. So in the most recent NAEP test, which is often seen as our nation's report card, only 36% of 4th graders scored proficient in science. If you look at how that breaks down with students who are identifying low income, it's only 22% of 4th graders who are scoring proficient in science. But this is the generation that we need. We really need this generation to be prepared to walk into these jobs of the future and also help us solve and tackle the challenges that lie ahead. Let's look at the next slide. So this is where Living Schoolyards fits in. A national push for Living Schoolyards coupled with a focus on professional learning for teachers is an incredible opportunity to change course. Life science, earth science, physical science, it all happens outdoors, and outdoor settings make it a lot easier to integrate science into other subjects like math and language arts, which would give us much more time than those 18 minutes a day for teaching science. Indoors, students learn about science, but outdoors, students actually do science. They can observe real world phenomena, they can collect evidence, identify problems, create their own solutions, and test those solutions. Not only is this kind of active learning proven to deepen knowledge and comprehension, but it also accelerates learning, and it's fun for students. It makes going to school worthwhile. Hands-on learning like this can open up possibilities for students because they get those firsthand experiences that we talked about, where they're actually engaged in science as a scientist. And so this can help them think about what they want to do for their careers, just much like me being immersed in education did early on. So let's look at the next slide. So what Outteach does is we're a nonprofit organization that partners with schools to make these transformations on their school grounds. And this is an example of one here in Dallas, Texas. We work with school communities and school districts to design and install what we call outdoor learning labs. And then we partner with teachers over the course of several years to provide them comprehensive professional learning so they can use these spaces to improve teaching, and especially in science. And we've seen great results for both teachers and students. So if we advance the slide, I can share some of those. So for teachers, we're seeing improvement of teaching across the board, but teachers are reporting being much more prepared to teach science. And again, these are teachers at the elementary level where only a third, the data shows, feel comfortable teaching science, but of the teachers that we're coaching, 91% feel more prepared to teach science. Students or teachers are also feeling more prepared to teach outdoors, with 93% of our teachers reporting that they are teaching outdoors as a result of our coaching program. And then this is having a great impact on students. So we're seeing increases in student engagement, which leads to better academic success. And we're seeing increases in student knowledge as well. So let's advance to the next slide. And we hear so many stories of impact from our teachers personally, just like Laura and Ryan have shared as well. So I'd like to share a little bit about one of our teachers in Dallas, Mr. Van Harris. He's a 5th grade teacher who's been teaching for 24 years in Dallas Independent School District. And he shared with us that because of his work with OutTeach, that much of his class is actually occurring outside. And that one of his favorite lessons is teaching about weathering and erosion in real time on school grounds. Outside, he said his students can really explore. They find things that are even new to him, and he gets to be curious with them. And he recognizes that these experiences that students have on the schoolyard and related to science give them something to draw back on when they come into the classroom and are testing as well. And so he sees that there's just a much deeper comprehension of the concepts that they're learning outdoors when they come back indoors. And as a result, at his school, he holds the distinction for the greatest growth in science test scores. And he was named his school's Teacher of the Year this year in Dallas. And so we're really always proud of teachers like that, and really proud of Mr. Harris. We also hear from teachers so often about how learning comes to life when it's real for students. And this is whether they're learning about the flow of energy on their schoolyard, they're observing and monitoring weather patterns over time, or they're learning about the nitrogen cycle from their compost bin and not, from kind of the pages in their book. So they're actually learning science by doing. And this is what inspires young people to think about what they might want to do into the future. So let's look at the next slide. So while my colleagues on this panel and I are impacting hundreds and hopefully thousands of schools, we can't reach them all, and we can't impact all schools all year. And so we really believe at OutTeach and probably all of us here today, that all students, that no matter where they come from, what their backgrounds are, what their resources are, they should all have access to this kind of real world learning that we can access through Living Schoolyards. And so that's why we support this Living Schoolyards Act. With science and STEM jobs on the rise, truly believe that we should have an education plan and strategy to reach all students. We need these students. We need today's students, that 50 million students that are in our public schools, to be ready to solve the challenges that are before us and to take advantages of the opportunities I showed with the growth in the STEM job sector. This is going to require so many different options and pathways to come to science, but the outdoors has to be part of this. With a Living Schoolyards Act, this is a way to tackle this in an equitable and meaningful way. Small and equitable investments across the country in schools can maximize spaces that are likely underutilized and transform them into real world labs that will inspire and prepare our next generation. So thank you for the work you're doing on this, and thank you for everyone here. And we'll go to the next slide. This is my contact information. So we'd love to hear from you, and we've left some information in the chat if you want to text us and kind of join our mailing list, and we'll share some updates. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeanne. That was really helpful perspective on on the benefits, some of the benefits that maybe we don't think of all the time of what living schoolyards can do for both communities and in terms of creating jobs now and in the future. Our final speaker today is Danielle Denk from the Trust for Public Land. Thank you so much for being here, Danielle. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for the inspiring presentations. I'm just so thrilled to see the movement expand to include such innovation and great work. I'm going to share a presentation about our work, and I might be doing this periodically because the room I'm in is dimming automatically, so apologize for that. So I'm with the Trust for Public Land, and we're a national nonprofit that is trying to connect everybody to the benefits of the outdoors. And we're actually in our 50th year this year, so a very exciting moment. On our journey, we've been committed to preserving land through conservation, building trails, helping to spark more parks and more places, and creating community schoolyards. You'll hear the term community schoolyards, and living schoolyard, green schoolyard, community schoolyard, they're very synonymous. So just replace it in your head with living schoolyard for the purposes of this conversation. When we work to, everything we do is really focused on putting community at the center. And what motivates a lot of our work is trying to connect everybody to a park within a 10-minute walk. We feel that this is a right that everybody should have. And as an organization, we've created some systems to help motivate mayors and to help motivate parks districts to create park spaces. But we've also been working with school districts because school districts own 2 million acres of land across the country, directly in the center of places where we need the parks the most. Through our analysis, we found that if we can transform schoolyards across the country and open them to the community after hours, then it can solve the park gap that we have in this country. The overall park gap is 100 million people who lack access to a park within a 10-minute walk. And 20 million people that are currently excluded from access can gain access if they're opened. Now, 80 million people total would gain access, including 28 million children. But the number that really motivates me is the 50 million children that we've all been talking about today. So for this reason, for all the reasons I mentioned above, Trust for Public Land has been working to transform schoolyards actually since the 1970s was our first pilot. And then our biggest program really got its roots in about 26 years ago in New York City. In New York City alone, we've transformed over 240 schoolyards, and the success of that program has really motivated us to take this nationwide. And you can see here in this mapping where we are currently working on schoolyard programs, the 21 states that have been activated to understand what these spaces can be, and the places where we're just getting started, including tribal community schoolyards, which are outlined in blue, which is our newest partnership with the Bureau of Indian Education. For us, and some of this may be a little redundant, but I wanted to touch on it quickly. You know, we have low activity levels among children at epidemic rates. Many schoolyards lack nature, and we know that lack of access to nature is associated with poor mental health. And loneliness and social isolation are at an all-time high. Surgeon General's report that recently came out attributes the lack of social connectivity with the same adverse health outcomes as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And that's incredible. I think that my jaw dropped when I heard that statistic, but we know we can make this difference, and parks, schoolyards are a really important solution. These spaces can become vibrant, they can become wonderful, and students are at the helm of making these changes when TPL works with them. We've done, places that improve physical activity levels, improve access to nature, improve access to healthy food, as you see here, and provide that wonderful opportunity to connect with your neighbor because they're open after hours. And that's so vital. The climate urgency is really compounded in communities that are in the front line of climate change, and especially in places that are the most vulnerable to severe heat islands, to flooding. And schoolyards, when transformed as shown here, can resolve so many of these challenges that we face, and also capture carbon at a significant rate, and also connect children to the wonders, the joy, the climate action that comes with having a community schoolyard or living schoolyard. And from the equity perspective, Our analysis has shown that parks serving communities of color are half the size and 40% more crowded than parks in predominantly white communities. And this is a real environmental justice criteria that we're also working to solve. So by transforming schoolyards, you get the solutions to the beginning of solutions to many critical issues. If all schoolyards across the country were transformed again, it would be this 80 million folks who would have access to a park within a 10-minute walk, and would really start to systematize access to nature in a way that's needed. And when it comes to learning, and I'm just skimming on these outcomes, but of the 100,000 public schools across the country, while we saw many that look asphalt and covered over, there are some that have greening, but this greening isn't really designed in such a way that can be conductive for learning. And so this can be transformed and should be transformed. And I'm so excited to hear from all the partners who are working really hard to make the outdoors a bastion for learning. One thing that we did also up in the northern New England area was conserved a forest next to a school. And we have a whole program focused on conserving forests near schools so students can get directly outside and learn in the beautiful canopy that surrounds them already, learn about trees, learn about nature, and also protect the land that otherwise might be developed into something else. So this way. So really, when I wanted to just go through that, because it's very important to understand that there are overlapping impacts. There's climate, health, community, learning, and equity impacts that come together to create social cohesion, resilience, environmental justice, empowerment, and advanced student achievement. I can't think of a single other solution that intervention that really does all these things. So what we're all doing here is incredibly powerful and needs to be taken to scale and needs to be the standard practice across the country. And because today's focus is mostly on community, I wanted to just share this logic model for the community level outcomes that we are starting to bring to life through this work, that we're all bringing to life through this work. So with the inputs of community engagement and student participation, I don't have my slides on this, but our students are our designers. They're the ones that work through the challenges that we face and come up with wonderful strategies. This opportunity for hands-on project-based learning that becomes a transformed schoolyard is really incredible. It's very inspiring, drives change, right? And then the other ones, physical features, play equipment, nature trails, sports equipment, outdoor classroom seating, all these are physical features that are very important. And then there's all the natural features. And I think all the partners here talked great about the gardens, the trees, the shrubs, the opportunity to connect directly with nature outside. If all of those come together, we see a host of outcomes and indicators that can really move the needle on so many of the challenges that our country faces. And I think Rachel will be sending some links that substantiate a few of these pathways. And I think there's about 100 studies that we've referenced to help come up with this model, a model that also looks at student outcomes. And it's motivating our work to disseminate resources and evaluation tools so we can really build a very robust database of the strong evidence that makes the connection that we're all, trying to make and that we do make every day. And then the other thing that I think is really important to touch on in this presentation is to talk a little bit more about community at the center. So we can say community at the center, but what does it really mean when it comes to getting your design off the ground? Well, the community must be engaged from the start of the design. They must be brought in as stakeholders, as informants, to build that stronger connection between the school and the community during design, helps to strengthen it during the stewardship phase, helps to build a sense of ownership of the schoolyard by the community. And this is particularly important if we're working in communities that might have higher crime rates and communities that might suffer from disinvestment, because when the community feels like they are part owners of the site, they help drive away unwanted activity. They help to steward the place, keep the gardens green during the summer, and really build these wonderful multi-generational bonds between the students and the seniors and the parents and the caregivers who are around the school. You can engage them also by creating a Friends of the Schoolyard group that is inclusive of students and school administrators, but then also the community. Again, building the systems for connectivity. Signage, right? Have the community come in as well as everybody else who's a stakeholder and brainstorm what the rules should be, how to create a sign that welcomes everybody, what languages should the signage be in, and that process in itself is a community building activity. And then when it comes time to open the site, when it comes time to, do cleanup days, bring the community back in, and always share that opportunity to strengthen that agreement. And then the last thing that I'll mention here, and this is very important, is create a shared use agreement. TPL helps to create shared use agreements between our school districts, our parks departments, sometimes our cities, and it outlines expectations. It helps stakeholders come together to figure out how can we get around this issue of maintenance, or how do we get around this issue of potential vandalism? How do we get around this issue of shared activity? And when all the stakeholders come together and realize certain fundamental challenges might also be opportunities, that conversation can lead to significant results. And we as an organization have been mapping this through our park score analysis. We track access to parks within a 10-minute walk, and the definition of a park can be a schoolyard if there's a joint use agreement in place. So in 2018, we saw 44 of the 100 biggest cities have joint use agreements, and by 2021, we saw 73%. And so it's been a significant rise, and we want to see that to be 100% soon. But you can see here are the numbers of how that bump in having a shared use agreement has really increased access to parks within a 10-minute walk for these particular cities. And it's a motivator. It's a leverage point that you can take to your mayor, that you can take to your school district and say, here's how we can work together on this issue by having this agreement and transforming this land. And what also happens is when you have a joint use agreement or a shared use agreement in place, it helps the school districts bring in resources that might only be earmarked for parks. So it becomes a good financial leverage point as well. And so I could talk on and on about schoolyards, and I know we are at time. So I just wanted to say that Trusted Public Land is very supportive of the Living Schoolyards bill, and encourage everybody to do your part to share the news, to gain momentum. We are at a moment in time where we can make this difference, and this bill will get us there. Thank you so much. And my email is here on the screen. And also, if you want to learn more about our mapping and our analysis, there's a link right there for our schoolyards map, which could be a resource for some of you. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Wow, thank you, Danielle. That was really incredible, very inspiring and innovative. And just think about the potential of what this legislation could do for communities across the country. I think we are out of time. All our incredible speakers were wonderful and had so much good information for you, but we don't have time for Q&A today, I don't think. I do just want to say two last things. Our next and final lecture is going to focus on schoolyard design and green infrastructure, and will feature speakers from the American Society for Landscape Architects, the U.S. Green Building Council, and the Children and Nature Network. It's on Thursday, May 25th, and hopefully you're already registered and we will see you there. And then the last thing that I want to say is to remind you that today, Senator Heinrich has reintroduced the Living Schoolyards Act. So please, when you get off this call, reach out to your senators and congresspeople, encourage them to co-sponsor the bill, and encourage them to contact Elizabeth Hill in Senator Heinrich's office, which I think they can do easily on their network on the Hill. So thank you all for coming today, and go outside and enjoy some nature. Thank you. Bye-bye.